Hello, welcome to the Incubator, the Biology Jobology podcast. We are entering the world of publishing, and we will be joined by Dr. Paulina Strzyz, who is an associate editor at Nature Reviews Molecular Cell Biology. Paulina, what do you do now? What's a typical day for you?
So that's the thing. There's not really a typical day in, let's say, the editing job. So each day is basically different. It really all depends on many factors. But let's say I maybe can give information about the general tasks that we have. And of course, every day they will be slightly different, depends on the manuscripts that we currently have in the process. So I also want to clarify that I work for the reviews section of Nature, so our procedures are also different than in primary research. So we have different also workflows and just also different tasks, different editorial role to start with. So basically what we have to do on a regular basis is, let's say, starting from commissioning the review articles. So we have to actually develop ideas about subjects that are good for reviews right now, and then find the suitable authors. So that's sort of a whole process that can take even a couple of weeks sometimes, from starting to even think about the idea to actually inviting somebody to write. So this is something that we constantly survey literature that's coming out to actually see what are the trends, what's happening in specific fields. So that's part of the everyday job, just serving the literature, for example, looking at current research that's coming out. Other more mundane tasks are just getting in contact with the authors. So there's always a lot of emails we have to send. Usually it's about keeping track of our manuscripts, informing authors about what's happening with their manuscripts, and also trying to motivate them to write for us. Because the preparation of the review is a long process, so they also take their time until they submit the manuscript. So we have to also kind of keep that on track. And of course, there is the manuscript handling itself. So once we have the manuscript in, we then edit the manuscript, giving feedback to the authors on the writing. And of course, there's a peer review process, which we also, so it involves finding suitable referees. Then once we get the comments, making a decision about the manuscript, and then sending the comments to the authors, receiving then the revised manuscript, which we also edit and do a final polishing of the text. And then finally we can pass the manuscript for publication. So there's many, many different tasks, and they really vary depending on the stages of manuscripts. That was long.
No, in depth is great. People want to know exactly what you're doing, so that's really great. I was pretty intrigued by how you were saying how you pick your reviews. It sounds, as you mentioned, you survey the literature and kind of figure out the trends. Can you dig into the secret sauce, the secret ingredients here? Like, how do you determine that?
Well, there's actually not even one single way of doing this. So basically, everybody develops their own strategy. So a lot of it also comes from conferences. We also go to conferences, and we can talk to scientists there, listen to the talks. They also are very usually keen, to share their ideas with us. So that's one very big source of ideas for reviews. Other ones are just simply seeing what's happening in literature. And once you see certain things coming up here and there, then you start maybe thinking, maybe there is some hint here and there. And then you make a bigger search, for example, let's say dating 2-3 years back. So whichever, we typically use PubMed for this, to actually look for publications on a very defined topic to see whether there is enough research in that area in the last 2-3 years typically. And once we find that that's really a good topic, then there's the search for the author. So in theory, the way you start off with the idea can be very different, and every editor will have their own sort of way of doing this or being inspired.
Excellent. So how did you get here? How did you get to be at Nature Reviews?
Yes. So I basically, after my PhD, I did a very short postdoc still in my basically the same lab, following a different project. And that was the time when I actually started thinking of what do I want to do. So obviously I started looking for other postdoc positions because I was still really interested in science and research, and I knew that I don't want to drop this. So that was always very close to my heart. But another thing I was thinking is that I actually don't want to be a group leader in the end. That was pretty clear to me. So I sort of knew that postdoc is, in the end, a sort of not going to bring me anywhere in the long run. Because as long as it will still help me develop and see more different techniques, for example, it will not help me in my career. So then I was thinking, what else is the job that actually lets you still be close to science, really, really engaged, but is not already in academia. And actually editing, I think, is one that comes as the first choice in that case. So then I actually started thinking of whether I could do it and whether I have capabilities to pursue this kind of role. And of course, at first, you actually have no idea whether you might be good at it. So this is definitely something you have to try to actually know. That's the thing. There's not really a way of saying whether somebody will make to this position and whether they will be a good editor. So I started just applying, I think, almost every relevant position that I could see appearing in ads online. And of course, at the first, I wasn't very successful, but I think that's a natural process when you actually start thinking more and more about how to develop your CV and cover letter. And at some point, you actually get nearly perfect, I would say, from based on your background. You cannot really sell yourself better. And I guess that's the point when people start noticing it. And for me, what worked was applying actually to a position that was initially temporary. So that was called a locum position, which was for a maternity cover for one of the editors in Nature Reviews. So I started as a temporary person just covering, and then I managed to get now a permanent position as well. So it is actually a good starting point, temporary ones, because actually that's when you can test yourself and also gain experience and decide whether that's something for you.
Yeah, it sounds like it works for multiple like levels here in a way. Like it works in the sense that you get to know if this is for you or not, and also like they get to know if you're good for this or not.
Exactly. It's a multiple testing, yes, on multiple levels from every side possible.
So how did you find these temporary positions probably just like kind of snap into the ether and then and back again? How did you quickly snag this up? How did you find out that this temporary position was open?
Actually, at least in Nature, the whole Nature brand, they have to advertise those positions. For a shorter period of time online. I think it's around 2 weeks that they have to be out. So they are available through all the major websites, like Nature Jobs, for example. So these are advertised as normal, as other positions would be. Just usually they typically need to hire relatively fast. They want the process to be really also short, so they shorten every step. So just add for 2 weeks, then they arrange process of testing the candidates also relatively quickly, and then once you are actually given the job, you also have to be aware that the starting point of the job will be also within usually 6 weeks probably. So you have to be ready to relocate and to start the new position quite fast.
So it sounds like you went straight from this short postdoc right into doing editing.
Yes.
And that's quite a stark transition. What's been the biggest challenge for you, changing from a pipette to a pen, essentially?
Yeah, it's something that I still sort of um, cannot understand how I actually managed to so smoothly in a way transition, because there wasn't any moment when I thought that I need something still, like a period of adaptation. Basically, you are thrown into a completely new environment, and from day one, you are basically doing a different job. So they really try to immerse you very fast. So there's not really a time where you feel like you still have to um, gain some skills before you start. You basically learn it on the job. So everything you do is still being, yes, you are supervised on every step at the beginning. So they check every task that you do, but you do it from the first day. So the thing is, they really put a lot of effort into training people, and there's not really like a course, for example, that you take and you become an editor. It's something that you really start by doing really the tasks.
I see. So it sounds like the environment was conducive to your transition, and to make sure that was
Yeah.
as smooth as possible. Great, great endorsement of nature there. Um, so now that you're kind of on the other side of the glass, so to speak, during your PhD and your postdoc, you're trying to submit articles to these journals, and now you're part of the process of on the other side of
Yes.
turn them into manuscripts. How's that kind of changed your viewpoint on the whole process?
Well, it does for sure a lot. So I also speak frequently to primary research editors, and we also meet, of course, on conferences, and then we have a completely different conversation on this level, right? So basically, what you notice is that editors are not like some of those dark judges of your manuscript. These are really people that are trying actually to do the best they can on evaluating manuscripts. And as much as also the whole, let's say, their evaluation, their initial evaluation can also really change the sort of the path your manuscripts goes through, because, for example, you are rejected already at the editorial stage. But I think in general, these are really people that are there to actually to help, to be honest, seriously. I know that for a person that has actually received a rejection, that doesn't look like that, but it's also very encouraged, authors are encouraged to actually also talk to editors, to have a conversation with them. I mean, also maybe on the level of email, for example, but they are there to answer questions as well. So they're not the judges really in the long run. They are there to run the process, to ensure that also they work for the interest of the journal, obviously, as well, to ensure that the quality of their submissions that they actually pass for peer review is high or suitable, for the journal. So I would say that the overall process of publishing, my view has not changed, but maybe on the role of the editor, that for sure has changed.
Great. So what do you like the most about your job?
What do I like the most is actually many things. So, but the most I think I would have to say is that I learn every single day something about, in my case, molecular and cell biology. But with every manuscript, you actually learn so much, and it's very broad knowledge. I mean, broad knowledge in particular, still scientific discipline, but it's so much broader than you get from your own research, where you actually focus so much on a very, very defined subject, while here we really are exposed to research in a really broader scale. So you really see more patterns rather than very specific details. So I think that the fact of learning and really becoming more confident with certain areas and really expanding the knowledge is the big advantage here.
So on the flip side of that, what's the most challenging part?
Oh, most challenging, I guess, is still the fact that it involves working with people, with scientists as well. And as every job that involves communication and working with people, I think is challenging. So sometimes, of course, we have to also, well, maybe criticize is not the right word, but we provide feedback to the authors on their manuscripts as well, in terms of the scope, for example, the general organization of the text, their figures, and obviously people are very attached to their writing, so very often they are not very happy to receive extensive revisions of their manuscript on the editorial part. So of course it is challenging to tell the experts in the field to modify something in their work, written work in that part. But I think that is the most challenging, being still, giving constructive feedback, let's say.
And so how have you learned to do that?
I guess there's also not really a single way we do it. It really depends a lot on each manuscript. But the most important thing for us is really, well, first of all, making sure that the manuscript aligns with the original commission, because we always commission the article, let's say, on a very particular subject. And then it can happen that what is submitted is not entirely what we expected. So that's the first check that has to be done, whether this is something that we in fact wanted from the beginning. Other things are just checking whether the organization of the text looks good. And also the thing is to mention here is that every editor will also do it slightly differently. So actually the manuscript in different hands could end to be slightly different. So I don't think there is really a general way of doing it. So it sounds maybe quite random, but this is something that actually we are there for also as the, let's say, naive reader of the first naive reader of the manuscript. And it just has to be clear for us what the author wanted to say. So that's basically our first job when we get the manuscript, to really establish that everything flows, that it's just understandable and comprehensive. So I think that's what we start with, at least.
So what's the typical career arc for an editor?
Oh, well, so it's actually not that many steps in the career that you can progress through. So typically you start these days as an associate editor. That's my position currently. And the only promotion that you typically get is to senior editor. And that's just based on each journal which will have their own sort of standards, I guess, what you have to meet to actually become senior editor. And then you apply for this promotion. And I mean, typically when you apply, you already know that you qualify. So I think everybody typically is granted the promotion. And then the only next position that you can have is becoming a chief editor. But that's not by promotion, that's by applying for a opening of this kind of a job. So if some let's say chief editor leaves the journal, then there's an opening for this position, and even people from the same journal, if they would like to get that job, they have to apply like everybody else.
So what suggestions do you have for people that are interested in getting into this field?
I think the most important is actually just trying to be as broad in let's say still in a particular scientific area, to really try to go to us. Okay, that sounds maybe for like a PhD student not super attainable, but to at least try to go to as many seminars, meetings, even local ones, if there are talks organized by a institute. Just try to really get the opportunity to hear as many people talk about their research and to be just exposed as much as possible to different topics, to also learn to listen, analyze, and just be excited about research in general. And what people also sometimes suggest, what also helps even to attract attention to your CV is, for example, starting to write a small blog about science. For example, highlighting interesting research papers. It doesn't have to be super big or popular. It's just something that you also do for yourself to start actually thinking more broadly about research and what excites you, and then putting it slightly more into writing and analyzing the current research. So I think these would be the really things that can majorly help the general exposure to research, and trying on your own to think about what's happening in the research, and then if you can start a blog that you can then direct people to it so that it's even documenting your interests.
So let's say you had like a time machine and you go back to when you were discerning like kind of which non-academic career track you want to go to. What would you have told yourself about editing?
I guess I would tell myself that it's definitely something that I would like to try, and I would do it again. But it's also day to day, it's not particularly exciting job, I would say. There's no this feeling of anticipation, for example, like in research, when each experiment, I mean, you are still excited by the results. And once the result that you really want comes, this is like one of the most magical times in your whole, let's say, half a year, for example. Here it's not really exciting on that level, but it's a very good job to stay close to academia, to still enjoy it, and to actually have the very broad understanding of a certain field. And actually, in the long run, people that have been in the company for many years doing editing, they even become experts in that field because they have really read so much about it. They have interacted with so many people, traveled to conferences. They really become experts. So that's something that is, I think, great about this job, that if you are willing to put effort into it, then it also gives a lot.
Okay, great. So moving on here, when were you most discouraged about your career, and what kind of got you through it?
I think the very difficult part actually came at the beginning of this year, when I was basically already starting to be fully independent, let's say, in my own job, and then actually the workload massively increases, and you start to really feel the pressure a lot. So this was actually very difficult for me, because I also realized that the amount of work we put into it, it's still huge compared to the normal working hours that we have on paper. So we are still scientists at heart, and we still kind of care much more than in other professions. So there are moments when you actually think whether that's really for me, all this level of engagement. And in the end, I sort of had a good conversation with my manager about it, and she then encouraged me that I'm doing well and that she has no doubts about my performance. So actually we just had a good conversation with my manager to solve this, and she also helped me with planning my work better. So it was basically solved just by addressing the issues directly with my boss. So I'm actually very, very happy and very lucky to have a very supporting manager. So that is definitely very precious.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so obviously science in general is just hard.
Yeah.
So during your PhD and when you were on the bench, like, do you have any mental health tips?
For scientists in general,
Yeah.
I guess I was also struggling in the research in general. So I'm still very much remembering the times of staying in the middle of the night in the microscope room, seeing the acquisition, overseeing it, and trying to see whether there is something promising in there. So the general tips, I guess, would be that if you love it, if you love being at the bench or really planning experiments and seeing the results, you just have to push through, and there's no other career that will satisfy you, I think. But if you think that the level of frustration is too much, just try to find an alternative that you would be comfortable and happy with. So I think that was my decision, that I just could not take the amount of frustration related to day-to-day tasks at the bench and failures of experiments. And then I decided that maybe it's better to find some alternative positions, but still I wanted to be close to research.
Excellent. And so I always like to end on the question of what words of encouragement do you have for young scientists?
I would say something similar to what I have just mentioned, that research is fantastic, and this is something that drives the progress. So if you are really loving this, then that's the way to go, and that's really something that people have to also struggle at, I guess. And okay, I'm not very inspirational here, I guess, but I would say that if really young scientists enjoy research, then the word encouragement is way to go, and go on and continue. This is fantastic.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Paulina.
I'm glad that they actually contacted me. It was a fantastic experience, and I hope you get something good out of it, and that the listeners will also learn from this interview.
A big thanks again to Paulina and to Protein Tech for sponsoring, and thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to rate us on iTunes. See you next month.